Hey guys, what's up? Panzer Dragon here, and today we'll be going over some tips on how to improve as a top laner. Now, no way am I a really good top laner or any of that. I'm not a Zion Spartan, but I can play at like a Diamond 2 level or Diamond 1, and so here I am to give some tips on how to play top lane from my perspective. Alright, so the first tip you want to do is you want to push the tower after getting a kill. Now the reason you do this is because you want to deny the enemy CS, and the turret takes all the CS, so they are denied experience and potential gold. Now if the enemy has teleport, he will teleport for that CS, which makes it kind of inefficient, but it still works because the enemy's wave will be pushing onto yours, giving you an advantage, and I'll explain in the next tip why that is important. But before we leave this tip, I want you guys to take note that a kill is somewhat equivalent to an enemy backing. So if you ever think the enemy is backing, you should still push the wave into his tower so he does lose all the creeps and is denied that gold and experience points. In the next tip, I'll be explaining why you want to let the creeps push into you. So you want to let the lane push and freeze it by your tower, and there's many advantages of doing this, which I will explain. First off, since the wave is pushing into your tower, you are making the enemy overextend more, thus leaving him more open to ganks. Second of all, if you do win trades with him, you can zone him from creeps as the wave is pushing, and since it's constantly pushing, you can deny him a lot of creeps or force trades in him if he does go for a CS. Naturally, going for trades in his minion wave will push the lane back into him, but obviously the natural standard is if you win trades, keep going for those trades. Third off, you are also safer from ganks since the wave is pushing into your tower, but just don't let the wave hit your tower since that tower can push back. Alright, so third tip is a really basic tip. I want you to ward the river at 240-ish. This ward is here to protect you from the jungle ganking your lane. And around 250 is usually when the enemy is done his second buff, and then he's gonna try and look for a gank somewhere. So by doing this ward and putting in the river, you are protecting yourself from that double buff jungler. And so you should always assume that the jungler does want to gank your lane around like 3 minutes since you are playing so overextended. But if you aren't playing overextended and getting pushed in, then you can either save your ward, or if you feel like you're getting dived, you can ward over the wall to see if you are actually getting dived by the enemy jungler. Next tip, you never want to let the enemy last hit. This only applies if you have an advantage over your enemy, like say an item, or you just generally win trades because you have the better matchup. So what you want to do is basically, if the enemy ever tries to go for a CS, then you go for a trade. And by doing this, the enemy has to sacrifice his hit point for 1 CS. And if you keep this up, the enemy is forced to use spells to last hit, or is forced to lose some CS in exchange for keeping her health high. Obviously, there are certain situations where you just can't do this against certain champions, but generally, if you do have a lead over an enemy, you want to keep the pressure onto him. So if your enemy laner roams, force him back. This is easily done by clearing one wave so that your wave does push into his tower, and basically he's forced back to go back to his lane, or he loses a lot of CS. And if he doesn't come back to lane, then he loses a tower, unless someone comes and tries to cover the tower. Now this is also associated with pushing the lane before doing something else. So let's say you're a better team fighter, someone like Lulu, then obviously you want to be team fighting more, and so you would push your lane and then you can roam. Now what I generally want to do is I always usually want to split when I do have my teleport up. This is because I want to have the lanes keep pushing and having some pressure onto my enemies, and then say if we ever do team fight somewhere, then we can get an objective off that, like a tower. Or if the enemy does win the team fight, then they can't really get any objectives since our lanes are pushing into them. And just in general, you can just teleport to team fights if your team ever does fight. So it's kind of like a 5v5, but it's more like a 4.5 versus 5v5 since you do arrive late. That's the only disadvantage, but the advantages you get from pushing the lane is really worth it. Next up is split push if you can 1v1 everyone. Now the previous concept, always split with TP, overrides this tip. But in general, basically, if you can 1v1 everyone on the enemy team, then what's going to happen is, well, they're going to have to send someone for you, and that guy's going to have a rough time, and so you can bruise him up and then get his tower after. Or they do send 2 people after you and causing a 3v4 somewhere else on the map. And so it's a really hard scenario for the enemy to deal with. Next tip along with split pushing is do not continue to split if there are MIAs on the map. If you don't know where the rest of the enemy team is, there's a chance that you could be ganked by 2 or more people. And so what I like to do when I'm split pushing is until I see all 5 people on the map, I do not press forward until I see them on the map. And until I'm 100% sure I can get into a 1v1 situation, I would just hang back until they reveal themselves on the map. Now when you're splitting, you usually want to ward like the enemy red buff or the blue buff depending on what side you are, as this will protect you from a lot of ganks since you can see a lot of people in that area except from people coming behind the tower. Remember, you always want to have a ward when splitting, as you don't want to have the risk of dying to a gank and having your split push strength gone if you do get ganked. And we don't want to die when we're split pushing. We really don't, unless our team is pressuring some other objective. Now, the next tip is totally different from split pushing, and this time you actually group with your team. So, team fight if you're the most fed. So, if you have all the kills, all the CS, whatever, then by all means, you probably have the most team fight potential. And let's say the team's gold are even, but if you have all the kills and your team fights a 4v4, they'll probably get aced, since you weren't there with them. Usually, I'd probably do this in like lower elos, since people don't really know how to disengage. Usually someone will get caught out or something under tower. And so I do feel like it's a better strategy than split pushing, in my opinion, in some situations. But probably the easy situation to analyze is if you're the most fed in your team and the teams are even, and so the only way you will win a 5v5 is if you're there. Now, what you want to do is telegank the overextend. This is how you make big plays as top lane. If you ever see like the bot lane, for instance, that's a one lane you should concentrate on. If you ever see them pushed up to your tower, just be like, hey, I'm going to teleport in and see what I can do and maybe clean up some kills. This is a way to obviously help your bot lane get back in the game if they're getting like dumpstered or something. And so I say it's worth sacrificing your top tower to help get 2 kills on bot, as you can get dragon off that and even their bot tower too. So if your bot lane is getting pushed in, tell them to ward deep so you can teleport in and help them and get some kills for your team. Alright, so if you suck at top lane or you're just getting out traded and dumpstered, what you can do is concentrate and farm without taking a lot of harass. This way you aren't a liability on your team, and well, if you do keep up in CS on the enemy, then you're going to be somewhat useful once you get the mid game. As obviously you don't want to feed your lane, and so the biggest thing you can do if you're being outclassed by your enemy, just concentrate and farm and don't feed. Just for once, just let your team carry you and sit back and let them do the work. Alright, so that's my tips on how you can improve as a top laner. Again, like I said previously, I'm like a Diamond 1 level top laner or a Diamond 2 level top laner, and this is more of a decision making guide and not really mechanics, because well, mechanics, you have to know the matchup by yourself. And yeah, so thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Check out my other 2 videos that are kind of related in helping you to improve as a player. And yeah, I'm Panther Dragon, and I will see you guys next time.